The moment research lead Ayla's antlers fell onto the cafeteria table, the entire room went silent. The sound echoed like hollow branches snapping in a storm, and every Salvani head turned toward her. In 200 years of academic service, Ayla had never shed her antlers from shock. Not once. The last recorded case in Salvani history had happened during their extinction crisis centuries ago. Yet here they were now, lying on a metal cafeteria table because of something completely absurd. A small glass jar, a spoon, and a human calmly eating from both. The smell in the air burned the back of Ayla's throat with a strange, sharp sweetness. She recognized it instantly now. 3 days earlier she had passed the cafeteria corridor and noticed the same scent drifting through the ventilation system. At the time she dismissed it as one of the countless unusual food smells humans produced. Their species had already introduced dozens of strange culinary compounds to the station. But now the odor clung to the air like a biological warning she should have taken seriously. The human responsible sat calmly at the table, dipping a piece of bread into the jar and eating with quiet satisfaction. His name was Tomas, an agricultural consultant from Earth assigned to Verdana Station 3. He had arrived 2 months earlier to help the Salvani adapt Earth crops for hydroponic farming. Tomas was polite, quiet, and rarely caused problems. Every day he brought a small glass jar with a handwritten label. The station translator interpreted the text as Abuela's special, do not touch. Nobody had questioned it. Nobody had scanned it. Then Bryn knocked it over. The young laboratory assistant had been collecting cafeteria samples when her elbow struck the table. The jar tipped sideways. Thick red liquid spilled across the metal surface. Before it even finished spreading, Ayla's portable chemical weapons detector screamed. Alarms erupted across the station. Red emergency lights flooded the cafeteria as security protocols activated instantly. Within minutes 3 armed response teams burst into the room expecting a biological attack. Yet the human stood there holding his spoon, looking at the soldiers like they had just arrived to investigate someone coughing too loudly. Inside the xenobotany laboratory the analysis began immediately. Molecular scans filled the central display while Bryn's hands shook so badly her notes appeared as jagged lines across her datapad. The compound appeared within seconds. Capsaicin. A chemical produced by earth plants called chili peppers. Its purpose was simple. Cause intense burning pain so mammals would stop eating the fruit. Across the 12 allied star systems, the compound was officially classified as a neurotoxin. And the jar contained 2.2 million Scoville heat units. Ayla checked the Salvani biological database. Her species' lethal threshold was 14,000. The human had just eaten 157 times that amount. When Ayla requested Tomas's medical file, it arrived in less than a minute. She expected pages of genetic modifications, rare adaptations, or specialized resistance treatments. Instead the file contained only a single page. Under toxin tolerance were 5 entries listed casually like dietary preferences: capsaicin, ethanol, caffeine, theobromine, and allicin. Ayla recognized only the first one. Curious and increasingly concerned, she opened the database entry for ethanol. She stopped reading after the second line. Ethanol was categorized across most allied systems as a volatile neurotoxin capable of impairing cognition, damaging organs, and causing fatal poisoning with sufficient exposure. Humans consumed it recreationally. Caffeine followed next. A powerful stimulant capable of triggering cardiac instability in numerous species. Theobromine appeared similar but even more toxic to certain alien biologies. Allicin, another compound derived from a plant called garlic, functioned as a natural antimicrobial chemical defense. Humans ate that one too. Ayla slowly looked back at the cafeteria recording. Tomas sat calmly eating the red sauce with bread while security teams surrounded him. Director Vashin arrived within the hour. His antlers were enormous, a branching crown marking centuries of authority. When Ayla showed him the toxin readings, those antlers trembled slightly. He immediately ordered a 12-hour medical observation of the human. Full monitoring. Continuous vitals. 3 research staff on rotation. Tomas agreed without hesitation. Sure, he said casually. But can I bring the jar? Ayla stared at him. Vashin eventually said yes, mostly because confiscating a human food item from a diplomatic consultant required notifying Earth's embassy. Nobody on the station wanted to involve Earth's embassy over lunch. The observation room smelled like warm bread and something far more dangerous. Tomas sat on the medical bench holding his jar while Ayla and 2 other scientists monitored every biological indicator available. Hour 2. Heart rate stable. 72 beats per minute. Hour 4. Mild inflammatory response. Bryn immediately flagged the change, preparing emergency medical alerts. Tomas glanced at the screen. "Oh," he said calmly. "This batch is warmer than usual." Ayla forced him to repeat the sentence so she could confirm the translator had not malfunctioned. It had not. He meant the sauce was spicier. The human was ranking the concentration of a classified neurotoxin based on personal taste preference. Hour 6. Tomas leaned toward Bryn and casually offered her some. The young assistant's antler buds instantly retracted beneath her skull. Ayla had seen that reflex only once before in archived footage from the Verdani border crisis. It was an involuntary prey response triggered by nearby predators. And it had just been activated by a lunch invitation. By hour 9 the jar was empty. Tomas's vital signs remained completely normal. Heart rate stable. Neural activity unchanged. Cellular damage non-existent. Every molecule of capsaicin had been metabolized and processed through his system like ordinary nutrients. But the data point that made Ayla stop writing entirely appeared on the neurochemical report. Endorphin release. Massive levels of reward chemicals flooded Tomas's brain immediately after consuming the toxin. At first Ayla assumed the system had malfunctioned. She ran the scan again. The result remained the same. Capsaicin triggered intense pain signals by activating heat receptors inside the nervous system. To the brain the sensation was identical to actual fire touching the skin. Yet instead of avoiding the compound, the human brain released pleasure chemicals in response. Pain triggered reward. Reward produced enjoyment. Enjoyment created craving. Ayla leaned back slowly in her chair. Humans had evolved a neurological system that converted poison into entertainment. But the deeper implications were even worse. Humans had not merely adapted to tolerate the compound. They had deliberately cultivated plants to increase its toxicity. Generations of selective breeding had produced peppers thousands of times more potent than their original forms. The jar on the table was not an accident. It was the result of centuries of agricultural development. Director Vashin asked for her recommendation. Ayla answered immediately. Do not invade Earth. Later, after the observation period ended and security teams stood down, Ayla spoke to Tomas again. This time she remained behind a protective screen. She asked about the jar. He seemed confused by the question. It's just salsa, he said. He explained that his grandmother had grown the peppers herself. The recipe had existed in his family for 4 generations. The peppers were called Carolina Reapers. The station translator rendered the name somewhat differently, Harvester of the Death State from the region of Carolina. Tomas laughed when he heard the translation. My abuela would be mad if she knew you ran tests on it, he said. Then he paused. But she'd also be a little proud. That was the moment Ayla realized the jar had never been the true emergency. The emergency was the civilization that produced it. Because any species capable of turning biological weapons into family recipes was not simply dangerous. It was fundamentally unpredictable. And the galaxy had just invited them to dinner. That evening Ayla filed a reclassification order with the Xenobiological Council. 340 human food imports were immediately flagged for review. 89 contained capsaicin. 167 contained ethanol. 204 contained caffeine. Every single one had been previously described by Tomas as mild. Ayla added a final statement to the report. Recommend updating human biological classification from herbivore-adjacent omnivore to apex predator capable of domesticating chemical defense mechanisms from a death world environment. The council approved the review instantly. Weeks later the station returned to normal operations. But Ayla kept one reminder in her office. The jar. It sat on her desk beside 2 research awards and a framed image of her first published scientific paper. The label remained handwritten in a language she still could not read. Whenever new researchers joined the xenobotany department, Ayla showed them the jar before anything else. Before the awards. Before the research archives. Before the lecture on alien agricultural ecosystems. She would point to the small glass container and say the same sentence every time. This is the most important object in this room. Most new scientists assumed she was joking. Some laughed. A few understood immediately. The jar represented more than a strange human meal. It represented a biological philosophy the rest of the galaxy had never encountered before. Most civilizations evolved to avoid poison. Humans evolved to experiment with it. Most species removed dangerous chemicals from their diets. Humans refined them. Most predators feared toxic prey. Humans turned the toxins into seasoning. But the most unsettling discovery of all came from the agricultural database that Ayla accessed weeks later. The pepper inside Tomas's jar was not the most powerful variety humans had created. Not even close. It ranked only fourth. Ayla closed the file and looked at the jar again. For the first time in her 200-year career she felt something unusual for a Salvani scientist. Fear. Not because the jar was dangerous, but because somewhere on Earth, a grandmother was probably growing something even stronger. And she was almost certainly planning to share the recipe with her grandchildren.